Lesson 2, Part 1. This is going to be the causes of World War II, and then Part 2 of this is going to be the effects of World War II. This is way, way too much to put into one video, so that's why I kind of broke it up. And again, similar to World War I, a lot of this is going to be repeat from American history. However, there is going to be a few tweaks here and there. So, as always, make sure you're listening for the causes and effects. But again, you're going to see diplomacy in international relations. How did the leaders of different countries kind of work together? And then lastly, obviously, war is a conflict. So, we'll be working towards that as well. So, again, I already kind of addressed it, but here you go. So, where we kind of left off in terms of the world, you got to remember that World War II was directly caused by World War I. The peace talks were not very good in World War One. I'm going to go a little bit more in depth here. The world is going through a Great Depression, which we talked about in American history side of things. But why this war really matters also is because 60 million people died, and that cannot go stressed, I guess you would say. So why does all this matter is because we learn from mistakes like this, and that's kind of the big deal. So given it context, as I said before, is that the Treaty of Versailles, everybody did not come out on the shiny side of it. Okay, you're going to notice that the people that are on the air quote bad side of World War II, the bad guys, they're the ones that are going to start World War II. Sorry, I said that backwards. On the bad side of World War One, they're going to be the bad guys in World War II. I think you know what I mean. In the middle of Great Depression, people are going to be desperate and they are going to want extreme fixes. And then imperialism is still kind of a thing, but it's going to build in nationalism, and people are going to be pushing that all throughout World War II, leading to the break. So, in this first part, I'm going to be talking about mostly how everybody got involved. So, a little bit more in depth here. When Germany had to accept the surrender of World War I and accept all the blame and then pay everyone back, that is going to make them angry. One particular person, Adolf Hitler. Then Italy. They didn't make out real good at the end of World War One with the Treaty of Versailles. They didn't get any of those land masses like I was saying before. So therefore, they were angry. And it's kind of the same thing. Japan, they didn't get a whole lot either. In fact, they were actually kind of on the crap end of the stick because of China. So those three are going to basically be out for revenge, and that's the bad blood leading from World War Two. Or sorry, World War One. So, a political cartoon, kind of a bitter pill to swallow, if you will. So, this leads into the first question. All parties were happy with how World War One ended. True or false? All right, so getting into how people got involved, it starts with Germany. So we know Hitler was the leader. We know that he had a peaceful rise to power. He did stage a little bit of military coups here and there, or nationalism coups here and there. However, when it all came, push comes to shove, how did he become the supreme leader? It was through democracy. People voted him in. And again, he went around preaching about how Germany needs to restore its nationalism, grab themselves out of the Great Depression, if you will, and put people to work. And he put people to work by building the military. But more than anything, he gave people hope in Germany. And that was something they didn't have for about 20-ish years after World War One. So how popular was he? This is a picture of a rally that he had where hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people showed up to listen to what he was saying. And again, they bought it hook, line, and sinker because they wanted a better life. When you get into Italy, same thing kind of happening here. Benito Mussolini is going to be preaching about how he wants to restore Italy back to the glory of the Roman Empire, if you will. And that was a big, big area of the world, which we already learned about in Unit 2. So, why this matters to us is because, again, preaching nationalism is what's going to inspire the people of Italy to rise up. And then Japan, the two leaders here, Emperor Hirohito up here, and this is Hideki Tojo. They didn't really need any more nationalistic pride because they already are very prideful people. However, they're an island. They need resources. They're in it for the imperialism side. So, second question, dictators that rose to power during this time for the bad guys, the Axis, believed that they promoted a return to what? Then the air quote good guys, the Allied sides of World War II. The Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin, we already kind of talked about him. Check that. No, we haven't. That's coming in a future lesson about communism and how this is going to kind of shape the world. But in this case, the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin, is kind of a couple dipples shy of a golf ball, if you will. He is going to be operating at full capacity during the Great Depression. However, it's going to come at a cost. People are giving up their freedoms underneath this communist control. So, why this matters to us is because this is the exact opposite of what we believe here in the United States. During Great Britain, during World War II, we have two people that are going to be in charge. This is Neville Chamberlain, and then this is Winston Churchill. So, both guys handled things completely differently. Neville Chamberlain kind of gave in to Hitler, Churchill did not. So, though they are both going to lead during World War II for Great Britain, and then France. I'm not even going to mention this guy because he was only around for a little bit. But this guy, Charles de Gaulle, he's going to be around for a lot bit. He's going to be the leader of the military of France during the time, and he's going to take over as president after it's all said and done. So that's kind of the good side, I guess you would say. We eventually join this side, which we know. But where it all starts to get leading into war, the two dictators on the bad side, Benito Mussolini, and then you have Adolf Hitler, they're going to kind of work their way across Europe by taking over different lands, violating the Treaty of Versailles, building up their military, all that mania stuff that we talked about before. But why this matters specifically is that it's hostile movements, I guess you would say. All goes back to imperialism, all goes back to World War One, and basically stuff that they weren't supposed to do. In the League of Nations, that was a thing. They didn't stop anybody. So they could have basically put the squash on it right away, but they didn't really have a whole lot of power. Because remember, the United States did not join it. So, how it kind of builds up again is that Hitler is actually going to take over the different parts of Europe. And Great Britain, France, they allowed it because they saw Stalin as the bigger threat. So, by Germany kind of becoming growing in power, that's kind of a buffer area between France and Great Britain and the Soviet Union. So, they said, have at it, Hitler. But then you got to promise not to do it anymore. Well, Hitler said yes, he promised, but then he quickly broke his promise. So, question number 3, why didn't the Allied leaders stop Hitler's advances in Europe prior to World War II? And then this leads to the official actions of starting World War II. So, here on the next slide. But before, you have to understand that Joseph Stalin, Soviet Union, Adolf Hitler, they actually are going to meet and they're actually going to make a deal not to fire or fight with each other. So, as you can imagine, they're both pretty bad dudes in the grand scheme of history. They're not going to keep this promise for very long. However, this is important because this prevented a two-front war from happening with Germany. So, what did they do? They agreed to both invade and split Poland on September 1st of 1939, which officially starts World War II. So, through the different domino effects we've talked about with mania, alliances particular with homies helping homies, this is where World War II is going to kickstart for most of the countries in Europe. So World War II started when Germany and the Soviet Union, invaded which country? All right, so then how did the United States get involved? It's worth noting because we're a military power in the world at this point, and we get involved into this big, massive event of the 20th century, so it's worth noting. And it's Pearl Harbor. We already know about this. So our naval base in Hawaii was attacked without any provoke the whatever word I'm going for here, without even basically being threatened by Japan, and they're just completely 100% surprise. So they take out a large portion of our ships, a large portion of our aircrafts. However, they didn't get the most important things. They did not get the aircraft carriers. They did not get the heavy cruisers, the massive, massive boats in our fleet. They did take away 2,500 people, sailors, if you will. That's kind of a big deal. But things that they didn't get were oil fields. That would have really, really crippled us. But needless to say, it did knock us out of the fight for about 6-ish months because we had to rebuild and retrain. But shortly after the attack, our president, FDR, is going to give the most famous speech in American history of declaring that December 7th is a date that will live in infamy. And we enter into World War II. So now it is a true world war, which takes us to who's on what side. So here it is. I already kind of spelled that out along the way, but who's on the Allied side, who is on the Axis side. So when you look at it, it's stuff again that we've already learned in the American history side of things, but some of these relationships are still around today, except for us and the Soviet or us and Russia. And it's kind of touch and go. But here's the question. The United States entered World War II following a surprise attack by which country? To be continued in part 2.